The wind howled through the weathered boards of the ranch house, carrying with it the dust and memories of better days. Caleb McKenna stood at the window, watching tumbleweeds roll across the barren landscape that had once been filled with laughter and life. 2 years had passed since the fire took everything that mattered, yet the acrid smell of smoke still haunted his dreams. His mother's letter lay on the rough-hewn table behind him, her shaky handwriting barely legible in places. "Please, son," she had written, "I'm dying, and I can't leave this world knowing you're alone. I've arranged something. Don't be angry. All I want is for you to have someone by your side." Caleb crushed the letter in his fist. He'd received word yesterday that she'd passed, taking with her the last person who still believed he deserved happiness. Now this, a mail-order bride, arriving today on the afternoon stage, his mother's final act of meddling, even from her deathbed. The ranch sprawled empty around him, 20 acres of stubborn Texas soil that he worked alone. The burned remains of the old stable had been cleared away, leaving only a blackened patch of earth where his wife Sarah and 3-year-old son Thomas had died. He'd rebuilt the stable 50 yards away, unable to walk over that cursed ground daily. Dust Hollow sat 5 miles east, a town that had sprouted up around a well and refused to die despite the harshness of the land. Caleb made the journey once a month for supplies, keeping his head down and his business brief. The townspeople had stopped trying to draw him into conversation after the first year. He saddled his mare, Rosie, the only living thing he allowed himself to care for anymore. She nickered softly as he mounted, seeming to sense his agitation. The ride to town passed in a blur of sagebrush and red dirt, the October sun beating down mercilessly despite the approaching evening. The stage office sat at the end of Main Street, a narrow building wedged between the general store and the saloon. Caleb tied Rosie to the post and leaned against the wall, pulling his hat low over his eyes. He didn't have to wait long. The stage rolled in with a clatter of wheels and a cloud of dust, the driver calling out to his team as they slowed. Caleb watched as passengers began to disembark, a traveling salesman, 2 rough-looking men headed for the mines, and then she stepped down carefully, one gloved hand gripping the doorframe. Her traveling dress, though dusty from the journey, spoke of Eastern refinement, deep blue wool with small pearl buttons running up the front. Dark hair was swept up beneath a modest bonnet, revealing a slender neck and straight shoulders. But it was her eyes that made Caleb's breath catch, gray as winter storm clouds and holding a weariness that matched his own. She stood beside her single trunk, scanning the small crowd. When her gaze found him, she didn't smile or wave like he'd expected. Instead, she studied him with those serious eyes before walking over with measured steps. "Mr. McKenna?" Her voice was low, cultured but careful. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "I'm Evelyn Morrison." She paused, then added quietly, "Your mother wrote that you were expecting me." "Expecting might be too strong a word," he said roughly. "But you're here now." Something flickered in her eyes. Hurt, perhaps, or resignation. "If you'd prefer I take the next stage back." "No." The word came out harsher than intended. He cleared his throat. "I mean, you've come all this way. My mother—" He couldn't finish. "She passed. I know. The driver told me when I asked after her in Millerton." Evelyn's fingers tightened on her small handbag. "I'm sorry for your loss." Caleb lifted her trunk, surprised by its weight. Whatever life she was leaving behind, she'd brought most of it with her. He loaded it onto the small wagon he'd brought, then helped her up onto the seat. Her hand in his felt small but not fragile. There were calluses beneath the fine gloves. The ride back to the ranch passed in silence. Caleb stole glances at his passenger, noting the straight line of her spine, the way she gripped the seat when they hit ruts but never complained. As they crested the hill that overlooked his property, she spoke for the first time. "It's very isolated." "Yes." "Good." The response surprised him, but he didn't pursue it. As they pulled up to the house, he saw it through her eyes, the weathered boards needing paint, the sagging porch steps, the emptiness that seemed to press in from all sides. "I'll show you to your room," he said, lifting down her trunk. "You'll want to rest after your journey." She followed him inside, her steps echoing on the wooden floors. He'd cleaned the spare room that morning, putting fresh sheets on the narrow bed and clearing the dust from surfaces. It had been his mother's room during her visits, and her presence lingered in the quilt she'd made and the small cross on the wall. "This will do nicely," Evelyn said, removing her gloves finger by finger. "Shall I prepare supper?" "I usually just have beans and biscuits." "Then I'll make beans and biscuits." She began unbuttoning her traveling coat. "The kitchen?" He pointed down the hall, then escaped to tend the horses. His hands shook as he unhitched the wagon. What had his mother been thinking? This refined woman in his rough home. Expecting what? He couldn't be a husband again. That part of him had burned with the stable. When he returned to the house, the smell of cooking filled the kitchen. Evelyn had found an apron somewhere and tied it over her dress. She moved efficiently around the unfamiliar space, as if kitchens were kitchens, no matter where you found them. "Sit," she said without looking at him. "It's almost ready." The beans were seasoned differently than he made them, and the biscuits were lighter. They ate in silence, the only sound the clink of spoons against tin plates. When they finished, she cleared the dishes and pumped water to wash them. "I don't expect anything from you," Caleb said suddenly. "My mother, she meant well, but I'm not looking for a wife. You can stay as long as you need to figure out other arrangements." Evelyn dried her hand slowly on a dish towel. "Your mother's letter said you needed help with the ranch. I can cook, clean, 10 chickens if you have them. I can earn my keep. And then," she turned to face him, those gray eyes unreadable, "I made a bargain with your mother, a new start for both of us. She said, I intend to honor it, but I won't force my presence where it's not wanted. We can be practical about this arrangement." That night, the first storm of autumn rolled in. Caleb lay in his bed listening to the thunder, remembering another storm 2 years ago when Sarah had curled against him, afraid of the lightning. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing the memory away. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. He opened the door to find Evelyn standing in the hallway, wrapped in a shawl over her nightgown. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, making her look younger, more vulnerable. "I apologize," she said quietly. "The thunder, might I sit by your fire for a while? I know it's foolish, but storms still." She trailed off. He stepped aside to let her enter. She settled in the chair by the fireplace, drawing her knees up under her nightgown like a child. He added another log to the dying fire and took the other chair. They sat in silence as the storm raged outside. When lightning illuminated the room, he saw her flinch and grip the arms of the chair, but she didn't speak, didn't explain her fear or ask for comfort. He found himself respecting that. As the storm began to pass, she rose to leave. At the doorway, she paused. "Your mother spoke of you in her letters. She said you were the strongest man she knew." She met his eyes. But even the strongest men weren't meant to carry their burdens alone. After she left, Caleb stared into the fire until it burned to embers. Somewhere in the house, a board creaked as she settled back into bed. The ranch didn't feel quite so empty anymore, and that terrified him more than any storm. The next morning, he woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of humming from the kitchen. Evelyn had already gathered eggs from the old coop he'd neglected and was frying them with salt pork. She'd pulled her hair back in a simple bun and wore a different dress, brown calico that had seen better days. "You don't have to do this," he said from the doorway. She flipped an egg with practiced ease. "I told you, Mr. McKenna, I earn my keep. Now sit down before your breakfast gets cold." Over the next week, they developed a rhythm. She rose early to start breakfast. He worked the ranch, mending fences and tending the small herd of cattle. She transformed the neglected house bit by bit, washing windows, beating dust from rugs, organizing the pantry. They ate meals together in companionable silence, neither pushing for more than the other could give. But Caleb noticed things. The way she knew exactly how much wood to add to the stove for baking, how her hands moved confidently when kneading bread dough, the faint scars on her fingers that spoke of years of hard work, whatever eastern city she'd left behind. She hadn't lived a life of leisure. One evening, as she darned one of his shirts by lamplight, he found himself watching her. The concentrated furrow between her brows, the steady movement of the needle, the way the light caught the auburn hints in her dark hair. "You weren't what I expected," he said without thinking. She looked up. Needle paused mid-stitch. "What did you expect? Someone looking for an easy life, a husband to provide for them." A bitter smile crossed her face. "If I wanted an easy life, Mr. McKenna, I would have stayed where I was." She returned to her sewing. "We all have our reasons for ending up in unlikely places." That night, unable to sleep, Caleb found himself outside her door. Not to enter, just standing there, listening to the quiet sound of her breathing. Proof that he wasn't alone anymore, even if he couldn't bring himself to want it. The photograph of Sarah and Thomas still sat on his dresser. He touched it gently, an evening ritual he couldn't break. But for the first time in 2 years, he wondered what they would think of the quiet woman who'd entered his life. Sarah had always said he needed taking care of. That left to his own devices, he'd forget to eat or sleep. Maybe she would understand. As October waned, Evelyn had worked her way into the fabric of ranch life so seamlessly, it was hard to remember the time before. But Caleb kept his distance, careful not to let her gentle presence thaw the ice around his heart. He'd loved once. The price had been too high to pay again. Still, when he heard her humming in the kitchen or saw her feeding the chickens she'd convinced him to buy, something in his chest loosened just a little. Maybe his mother had known what she was doing after all. Maybe two broken people could share a space without demanding to be whole again. Maybe that would be enough. November arrived with bitter winds and the promise of an early winter. Evelyn had been at the ranch for 3 weeks, and the house bore her touch in countless small ways. Curtains washed and pressed, floors scrubbed until they gleamed, wildflowers in a jar on the kitchen table. But it was during a quiet supper of stew and cornbread that she finally spoke of her past. "I had a son," she said suddenly, her spoon suspended over her bowl. "Henry, he would be 6 now." Caleb's hand stilled on his coffee cup. He waited, knowing the weight of such admissions. "He died of fever, they said." Her voice was steady, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the spoon. "But I was there. I held him through the night, gave him the medicine the doctor prescribed. He was getting better, sitting up, asking for water." She set down the spoon carefully. "I fell asleep in the chair beside his bed. When I woke, he was gone. Fevers can turn quick," Caleb said quietly, "especially with young ones." Her laugh was bitter as winter frost. That's what the doctor said. But his wife had been whispering for months about how unnatural it was. A woman like me raising a child alone. When Henry died, she made sure everyone heard her theories. Said I must have given him too much laudanum, that I wanted to be free of the burden. Her eyes met his, fierce and pained. They called me a baby killer. Not to my face, of course, but in whispers that followed me everywhere. Caleb felt a familiar anger rise in his chest. The same helpless rage he'd felt when people whispered that the fire was God's judgment for working on the Sabbath. People need someone to blame when tragedy strikes, makes them feel safer, thinking it couldn't happen to them. Perhaps. Evelyn rose and began clearing the dishes. But whispers have a way of becoming truth when repeated often enough. No one would employ me. My landlady asked me to leave. Even the church. She trailed off, her back to him as she worked at the wash basin. "Is that why you answered my mother's advertisement?" She nodded, still facing away. "A chance to go where no one knew my name, my shame. Your mother was very kind in her letters. She said you understood loss. She had no right. She had every right." Evelyn turned, drying her hands on her apron. She was a mother who loved her son. I would have done the same for Henry. That night, Caleb lay awake thinking about the woman sleeping down the hall. He'd assumed she was running from a failed romance or family disappointment. Instead, she carried a grief that matched his own, made worse by the cruelty of suspicion. No wonder she'd been grateful for the ranch's isolation. The next morning brought their first trip to town together. Evelyn needed fabric and thread, and they were low on flour and coffee. Caleb dreaded it, the stares, the whispers that would start when people saw he'd taken a wife, or whatever Evelyn was to him. She emerged from her room in her best dress, the blue wool from her arrival, and had arranged her hair in a style that was proper but not fancy. "I'm ready," she said simply. The ride to Dust Hollow passed quietly. As they reached Main Street, Caleb saw curtains twitch and heads turn. By the time he helped Evelyn down from the wagon, a small crowd had gathered outside the general store. "Morning, McKenna," called Jake Sullivan, the store owner, his eyes fixed on Evelyn with undisguised curiosity. "This the mail-order bride we heard about?" "This is Mrs. Morrison," Caleb said firmly. "She's helping with the ranch." "Mrs.?" Martha Sullivan appeared beside her husband, sharp eyes taking in every detail of Evelyn's appearance. "A widow, then?" Evelyn stepped forward with quiet dignity. "Yes, ma'am. Pleased to meet you." The woman's gaze lingered on Evelyn's fine features and graceful bearing. "You don't look like someone who'd need to advertise for a husband, especially not way out here." Caleb saw Evelyn's spine straighten, but her voice remained level. "We all do what we must, don't we?" Inside the store, whispers followed them down every aisle. Evelyn selected her goods with careful attention, as if she couldn't hear the speculation, but Caleb noticed the slight tremble in her hands as she examined a bolt of calico. "Pretty thing like that. Answering advertisements," someone muttered. "Must be something wrong with her. Heard she came from back east. You know what kind of women they have in those cities. McKenna should know better, after what happened to the first one." Evelyn's face had gone pale, but she continued shopping. At the counter, she counted out coins from her small purse. Despite Caleb's attempt to pay, "I have my own money," she said quietly. Martha Sullivan took the coins with obvious reluctance, as if they might be tainted. "Will you be coming to church on Sunday?" Reverend Morrison, no relation. "I assume he does like to welcome newcomers." "Perhaps," Evelyn said. "Good day." Outside, Caleb noticed her hands shaking as he helped her into the wagon. Neither spoke until they were well out of town. "It doesn't get easier," she said finally. "The whispers, I'd hoped, but people are the same everywhere, aren't they? You don't have to go back. I can get whatever you need." She shook her head. "I won't hide. I've done nothing wrong." That evening, Evelyn retreated to her room early, claiming a headache, but later, when Caleb went to check the horses, he heard muffled sobs through her window. He stood frozen, wanting to comfort her but not knowing how. He'd built walls around his heart for a reason. Getting involved in her pain would only weaken them. 3 days later, Evelyn surprised him by taking extra care with supper, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans she'd preserved from the garden, and an apple pie that filled the house with cinnamon warmth. "What's the occasion?" he asked. She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "It's Henry's birthday. He would have been 6 today. I thought I'd like to mark it somehow, with good things instead of sad." They ate in companionable silence, but Caleb found himself watching her more than usual. The way lamplight caught in her hair, the grace of her movements, the quiet strength that let her honor her son's memory without bitterness. "Tell me about him," he said as she served the pie. Her face lit up. "He had the curliest brown hair, impossible to tame, and these enormous green eyes, my father's eyes. He was curious about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds sleep? Can fish see underwater?" She laughed softly. "I used to make up answers when I didn't know. Thomas was like that." Caleb found himself saying, "Couldn't walk past anything without picking it up, examining it." Drove Sarah half mad with the things he'd bring in the house. Bugs, rocks, once a small snake. They talked through 2 cups of coffee, sharing memories they'd kept locked away. When Evelyn finally rose to clear the dishes, Caleb caught her hand. "Thank you," he said roughly. "For the meal. For this." She squeezed his fingers gently before pulling away. "We're not meant to carry our grief alone, Caleb." The next week brought the first real cold snap. Caleb woke one morning to find frost on the windows, and Evelyn struggling to start the kitchen stove with damp wood. "Let me," he said, taking the kindling from her hands. Their fingers brushed, and he felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with the cold. As the fire caught, Evelyn stumbled, catching herself against his shoulder. "I'm sorry, I felt dizzy for a moment." He steadied her, noticing her flushed cheeks and bright eyes. "You're burning up. I'm fine, just tired." She swayed again, and he caught her before she could fall. "Bed, now." For once, she didn't argue. He helped her to her room, trying not to notice how right she felt in his arms. Once she was settled under the quilts, he went for cool water and cloths. "You don't have to," she murmured as he placed a damp cloth on her forehead. "Hush. Rest." For 2 days and nights, the fever raged. Caleb tended her as gently as he knew how, spooning broth between her cracked lips, changing sweat-soaked sheets, keeping vigil in the chair beside her bed, in her delirium. She called for Henry, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing at jokes only she could hear. "No, please," she moaned one night, tossing against the pillows. "He's breathing. I swear he's breathing. Don't take him. It's not what you think." "Henry, baby, wake up. Please wake up." Caleb held her hand through the worst of it, whispering reassurances she couldn't hear. When the fever finally broke on the 3rd morning, she woke to find him asleep in the chair, still holding her hand. "Caleb?" Her voice was weak but clear. His eyes flew open. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by horses." She tried to sit up, but he gently pushed her back. "Rest. You've been very sick." "How long?" 3 days. Her eyes widened. "You've been here the whole time?" He shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Couldn't let you die. Who'd make the biscuits?" She laughed weakly, then grew serious. "I talked in my sleep, didn't I? About Henry? Some. I dream about that night often. In the dreams, I save him. I wake up in time, give him water, call the doctor back." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of reliving it." Without thinking, Caleb brushed the tears away with his thumb. "I know. I have the same dreams about the fire. Getting there in time, pulling them out, but dreams can't change what happened." She caught his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "You're a good man, Caleb McKenna. Better than you know." He pulled away, disturbed by the warmth her words created in his chest. "Rest. I'll bring you some broth." As she recovered over the next week, something shifted between them. The careful distance Caleb had maintained began to feel forced rather than natural. He found himself looking for excuses to check on her, bringing her tea, reading to her from the one book he owned, a collection of poetry that had been Sarah's. One afternoon, he returned from checking the cattle to find her out of bed, wrapped in a shawl and standing at the kitchen window. "You should be resting," he said. "I've rested enough." She didn't turn from the window. "I've been thinking about what you said, about dreams not changing the past. You're right, of course, but I wonder, can we change the future, or are we doomed to always be what tragedy made us?" He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the vast Texas landscape. "I used to think the future died in that fire, that I was just going through the motions until my time came." "Used to?" He glanced at her profile, the determined set of her jaw. "You make me remember there might be reasons to keep going." She turned to face him then, those storm-gray eyes searching his. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? The grieving cowboy and the fallen woman." "You're not fallen," he said fiercely. "Don't ever call yourself that." "Then what am I?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities he wasn't ready to name. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like it was trying to get in, or maybe trying to blow away the walls they'd both built so carefully. "You're Evelyn," he said finally. "That's enough." That night after supper, she found him in the barn, brushing down Rosie. The familiar routine usually calmed him, but his hands were restless, his mind full of thoughts he couldn't settle. "Can't sleep either?" she asked from the doorway. "Horse needed tending." She moved into the barn, no longer tentative in what had become their shared space. "I wanted to thank you for taking care of me, for believing me about Henry." "Nothing to thank me for." "There is—" She moved closer, near enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used. "You could have left me to burn with fever. Some would say it was God's judgment catching up with me. Those people are fools, perhaps, but I've met precious few who'd agree with you." She reached up, touched his face gently. "You have more kindness in you than you want anyone to see." He caught her wrist, meaning to move her hand away. Instead, he found himself holding it against his cheek, starved for the simple human contact. "Evelyn, I know," she whispered. "You're not ready. Maybe you never will be. But I need you to know, you saved me, Caleb, not from poverty or shame, but from believing the whispers were true, from thinking I deserved to be alone." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, soft as a butterfly landing. Then she was gone, leaving him standing in the barn with his heart hammering and his carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. December brought snow early that year, blanketing the ranch in pristine white that made everything look clean and new. Evelyn had transformed the house for Christmas, pine boughs on the mantel, red ribbons on the doors, the scent of cinnamon and cloves from the apple cider she kept warming on the stove. It was the first time in 2 years the house had acknowledged the season. Caleb found her one morning organizing the kitchen cupboards, humming a carol under her breath. She'd taken to wearing her hair in a looser style, soft tendrils framing her face. The sight of her, so at home in what had been Sarah's domain, should have bothered him. Instead, he found himself lingering in doorways just to watch her work. "You're staring," she said without turning around. "Just wondering what you're doing to my perfectly good cupboards." She laughed, a sound he'd grown to treasure. "Your perfectly good system had coffee stored in 3 different places." "How did you find anything?" I managed. "Barely." She turned to face him, flour dusting her apron. "I'm making Christmas cookies, the ones with molasses that my grandmother used to make, unless you object." "No objection." He cleared his throat. "Evelyn, about Christmas, I don't really—" "I know," her voice gentled, "but hiding from joy won't bring them back, Caleb. They wouldn't want that for you." She was right, of course. Sarah had loved Christmas, had spent weeks preparing, making the house magical for Thomas. But acknowledging that felt like betrayal, like moving forward meant leaving them behind. That afternoon, while Evelyn baked, Caleb found himself in the spare room that had become hers. Her trunk sat open in the corner, and something inside caught his eye. A small painted portrait of a boy with brown curls and laughing green eyes. Henry. He was beautiful, wasn't he? Caleb turned to find her in the doorway. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. It's all right." She moved past him to pick up the portrait, tracing the child's face with one finger. The artist said he'd never painted a child who smiled so much. Henry couldn't sit still, kept making faces to make the poor man laugh. "You must miss him terribly. Every moment." She set the portrait carefully on the dresser. "But lately, the pain feels different, less sharp. Is that wrong?" "No." Caleb moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability in her voice. "It means you're healing. Took me longer to realize that was allowed." She looked up at him, those gray eyes bright with unshed tears. "Sometimes I feel guilty. For laughing, for finding moments of happiness here with—" She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "With," he prompted softly. "With you." The words were barely a whisper. "I came here for a new start, but I never thought I could feel—" He knew he should step back, maintain the careful distance that kept them both safe. Instead, he reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "Feel what?" "Alive," she breathed. "You make me feel alive again." The space between them crackled with possibility. Caleb could see the pulse fluttering at her throat, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. All he had to do was lean down, close the distance, taste the sweetness of her lips. A log crashing in the fireplace made them both jump. Evelyn stepped back, pressing a hand to her chest. "I should check the cookies," she said, fleeing the room. Caleb stood alone, heart hammering, wondering when exactly Evelyn Morrison had slipped past every defense he'd built. The next Sunday, Evelyn announced she wanted to attend church. Caleb hadn't been since the funeral, but the determined tilt of her chin told him she wouldn't be dissuaded. "You don't have to come," she said, pinning on her best hat. "But I won't hide anymore. They can whisper all they want." "I'm coming." Her smile was worth facing the entire town's scrutiny. The small church was packed, it being the last Sunday before Christmas. Heads turned as they entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. Caleb kept his hand on Evelyn's elbow, guiding her to a pew near the back. Reverend Morrison, no relation, as Martha Sullivan had pointed out, was a thin man with kind eyes who preached about forgiveness and new beginnings. Throughout the service, Caleb felt the weight of stares, heard the rustle of whispers. Evelyn sat straight-backed beside him, eyes forward, hands folded in her lap. After the service, they were surrounded immediately. Mrs. Morrison. Martha Sullivan descended like a hawk. "How lovely to see you in church. Will you be making this a habit?" "I hope to," Evelyn replied calmly. "And will Mr. McKenna be making an honest woman of you soon? It's quite scandalous. You know, living out there unchaperoned." Caleb stepped forward, but Evelyn's hand on his arm stopped him. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said with quiet dignity. "Mr. McKenna has been nothing but a perfect gentleman. I'm employed as his housekeeper, with my own quarters. I'm sure a good Christian woman like yourself wouldn't suggest anything improper without proof." Martha's face reddened. "Well, I never—" "No," Evelyn agreed. "You never— Good day." They left the church with heads high, but Caleb could feel Evelyn trembling beside him. Once in the wagon, she let out a shaky breath. "That was—" He searched for words. "Necessary." She pulled off her gloves with sharp movements. "I won't be cowed by gossip. Not again. You were magnificent." She looked at him in surprise, then smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. Wasn't I?" That night, they decorated a small pine tree Caleb had cut from the back pasture. Evelyn had made ornaments from scraps of fabric and ribbon, and they strung popcorn by the fire. It was domestic in a way that should have scared him, but instead felt right. Sarah loved Christmas, he found himself saying. She'd start planning in October, making lists, hiding presents. Thomas was too young to really understand, but he loved the tree, called it the pretty tree, and would sit underneath for hours, just staring up at the candles. Evelyn's hand found his. "Tell me more about them." So he did. For the first time in 2 years, he spoke freely about his family. Sarah's infectious laugh, Thomas's first steps, the way they'd fit together, a perfect unit he'd thought would last forever. "She would have liked you," he said finally. "Sarah always said I needed someone to challenge me, keep me from brooding. And do I? Challenge you?" He looked at her then, really looked, at the strength beneath the softness, the resilience that had brought her across the country to start over, the way she'd made his empty house a home again without trying, every day, he admitted. She squeezed his hand. "Good." Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold. Evelyn had been mysterious all morning, shooing him out of the kitchen while she prepared something special. When he came in for midday dinner, he found the table set with Sarah's good dishes and a feast laid out. Roasted venison, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, and pie. "What's all this?" Christmas dinner, she said simply. I thought we should celebrate properly. They ate slowly, savoring each bite and the companionable conversation. As Evelyn cleared the dishes, Caleb disappeared into his room. He returned with a small wrapped package. For me? She seemed genuinely surprised. Open it. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain. It was my grandmother's, he explained. Been sitting in a drawer for years. Thought it should be worn again. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Caleb, I can't. Yes, you can. He took the necklace and moved behind her to fasten it. His fingers brushed her neck, and he felt her shiver. There, perfect. She turned to face him, one hand touching the locket. I have something for you too. She retrieved a package from behind the flower bin. It's not much. Inside was a new shirt, carefully stitched from the fabric she'd bought in town. You made this? You needed one that wasn't mended 3 times over. She bit her lip. Is it all right? It's perfect. He ran his hands over the fine stitching, touched by the hours of work it represented. Thank you. They stood facing each other, the kitchen warm and glowing with lamplight. Outside, snow began to fall again, muffling the world in quiet peace. Evelyn stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. Caleb. He caught her hand, meaning to step back as he always did, but something in her eyes stopped him. A question, a hope, an invitation he was tired of refusing. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he lowered his head. Their lips met in a kiss that was tender and tentative, full of promise and pain. Evelyn made a soft sound and pressed closer, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Evelyn's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. I'm sorry, Caleb said roughly. I shouldn't have. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't apologize. Not for that. Evelyn, I can't promise. I'm not asking for promises. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. I know you're not ready to let go of the past. Maybe you never will be, but I'm here now, Caleb, and I care for you, more than I should. He wanted to reach for her again, to promise things he wasn't sure he could deliver. Instead, he nodded slowly. I care for you too. That's what scares me. That night, they sat by the fire reading poetry aloud, a tradition Sarah had started. But when Evelyn's voice grew sleepy and she dozed off in her chair, Caleb didn't wake her. Instead, he sat watching the firelight play across her features, memorizing the peace on her face. The locket glinted at her throat, looking like it had always belonged there. Maybe that's what scared him most, how easily she'd fit into his life, how empty it would feel if she left. He thought of Sarah, wondering what she'd think of him falling for another woman. But he could almost hear her practical voice. Don't be a fool. Caleb McKenna, that woman is a gift. Don't waste it. When Evelyn stirred, he gently woke her and walked her to her room. At her door, she turned back. Thank you for today, she said softly. For letting Christmas back in. Thank you for reminding me it was worth celebrating. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. Good night, Caleb. As he lay in bed that night, Caleb touched his cheek where her lips had been. The walls he'd built were crumbling faster now, and he wasn't sure he had the strength to rebuild them. Worse, he wasn't sure he wanted to. In the room down the hall, he could hear Evelyn moving about, preparing for bed. His house, which had been a tomb for 2 years, felt alive again, and for the first time since the fire, so did he. The day after Christmas, they fell back into their routine, but everything felt charged with new awareness. Every accidental touch sent sparks through him. Every shared glance held weight. They were dancing around something inevitable, both wanting and fearing it in equal measure. One evening, as Evelyn mended by the fire and Caleb worked on ledgers, she spoke into the comfortable silence. I've been thinking about what Martha Sullivan said, about propriety. Caleb looked up sharply. You're not leaving? No. She set down her sewing. But perhaps we should consider making things official. For appearance's sake, if nothing else. His heart stopped. Are you proposing to me, Evelyn Morrison? Color flooded her cheeks. I'm being practical. People will talk regardless, but at least, Evelyn. He moved to kneel beside her chair. If we marry, it won't be for appearances or practicality. When I make you my wife, if you'll have me, it'll be because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Her breath caught. When? I'm not there yet, he admitted honestly. But I'm closer every day. Can you wait? She cupped his face in her hands. I've waited this long to feel alive again. I can wait a little longer. January arrived with bitter winds that rattled the windows and piled snow against the doors. It was during one such storm that Jake Sullivan rode out from town, his horse struggling through the drifts. Caleb met him at the door, immediately wary of the store owner's grim expression. McKenna, we need to talk. Jake glanced past him to where Evelyn stood in the hallway. Might be best in private. Whatever you have to say can be said in front of Mrs. Morrison. Jake shifted uncomfortably. There's a man in town. Came in on yesterday's stage. He's been asking about a woman, dark hair, gray eyes. Goes by Evelyn. Says she might be calling herself a widow. Caleb felt Evelyn stiffen beside him. Her face had gone pale, but she stepped forward with quiet dignity. What does this man want? Claims he's looking for his wife. Says she ran off 6 months ago. Took some money that wasn't hers. He's got papers. McKenna, marriage certificate. Even a daguerreotype. Jake pulled off his hat, twisting it in his hands. I'm not saying I believe him, but Sheriff Watson says if the papers are real. Thank you for the warning, Caleb said coldly. Now get off my land. After Jake left, Caleb found Evelyn in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. It's not what you think, she said without looking at him. I was never truly married to him. Tell me. She sank into a chair, suddenly looking fragile. His name is Richard Thornton. My father owed him money, gambling debts. When father died, Richard came to collect. I had nothing to give him except... She swallowed hard. He said he'd forgive the debt if I agreed to be his wife. I was 17, alone, desperate, so I agreed. Caleb's hands clenched into fists, but he remained silent. The ceremony was a sham, his cousin pretending to be a minister. I didn't know until months later when I tried to leave the first time. He laughed, said it didn't matter if it was legal or not. I belonged to him either way. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He was the result of that ownership. The money? A bitter smile crossed her face. My wages from taking in washing. 3 years of saving hidden penny by hidden penny. My escape fund. He must have found where I'd hidden it after I left. We'll fight this, Caleb said fiercely. Get a lawyer. With what proof? He has papers, even if they're false. I have nothing but my word, and we both know what that's worth to people here. She stood abruptly. I should leave. Tonight. I won't bring this trouble to your door. Like hell. She looked at him in surprise. Caleb rarely cursed, especially in front of her. You're not running again, he continued. This is your home now. We'll face whatever comes. Her eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you risk your reputation, your standing in town, for a woman who's brought you nothing but complications? He crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. Because you're not nothing. You're everything I thought I'd never have again. Laughter in this house, warmth in my life, a reason to wake up that isn't just habit. His voice roughened. Because somewhere between that first storm and now, I fell in love with you. She made a sound between a sob and a laugh. Caleb, I know I said I wasn't ready, but if that bastard thinks he can waltz in here and take you away, he'll learn different. You're mine, Evelyn, if you'll have me. Yes, she whispered, then stronger. Yes. He kissed her then, pouring all his fear and determination and love into the contact. When they broke apart, both were shaking. Pack what you need, he said. We're going to town. Now? In this storm? Right now. We're getting married proper, before he can make any claims. Reverend Morrison can perform the ceremony tonight. They made the treacherous journey through the storm, arriving at the parsonage near midnight. Reverend Morrison, roused from sleep, listened to their story with growing concern. "I can perform the ceremony," he said slowly. "But if this man has prior claim, he has no claim," Caleb said flatly. "The lady says she was never legally married, and I believe her." The Reverend's wife, a small woman with kind eyes, touched her husband's arm. "Remember what you preached last Sunday, dear, about new beginnings and forgiveness." The ceremony was simple, just the four of them in the parsonage parlor, snow beating against the windows. Evelyn wore her traveling dress, her hair still damp from snow, but when she spoke her vows, her voice was strong and clear. "I, Evelyn Morrison, take you, Caleb McKenna, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, from this day forward until death do us part." Caleb's hands shook as he slipped his grandmother's ring, hastily retrieved from the ranch, onto her finger. "I, Caleb McKenna, take you, Evelyn Morrison, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and love you with whatever time God grants us, from this day forward until death do us part. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The Reverend smiled. "You may kiss your bride." This kiss was different from the others, a claiming, a promise, a seal on their new life. When they parted, Evelyn was crying. "No more tears," Caleb whispered, wiping them away. "You're Evelyn McKenna now. Let him try to take you from me." They spent their wedding night at the small boarding house in town, the storm making travel impossible. In the lamplight of the simple room, they came together as husband and wife, tenderly, passionately, two souls finding healing in each other's arms. "I love you," Evelyn whispered against his shoulder afterward. "I didn't think I'd ever say those words again." "I love you too," he replied, marveling at how easily the words came. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for being worth waiting for." The next morning dawned clear and bright. They emerged from the boarding house to find Richard Thornton holding court outside the sheriff's office, waving his papers and demanding justice. He was a thin man with cold eyes and a weak chin, dressed in a cheap suit that tried too hard to look prosperous. When he saw Evelyn, his face contorted with rage. "There she is, my wife, the thief who stole from me!" Sheriff Watson, a fair man who'd known Caleb since childhood, looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, this gentleman says, this is Mrs. Caleb McKenna." Caleb interrupted, stepping protectively in front of Evelyn. "We were married last night by Reverend Morrison. Any claim this man had, if he ever had one, is void." Thornton's face purpled. "She was mine first. I have papers." "Then show them," Sheriff Watson said. Thornton produced a marriage certificate with a flourish. The sheriff examined it carefully, then frowned. "This is signed by a Reverend James Thornton. Any relation?" "My cousin," Thornton admitted. "But he's ordained." "Is he now?" The sheriff's expression grew skeptical. "And where can we find this Reverend Thornton to verify his credentials?" Thornton faltered. "He travels, circuit preacher. Convenient." Sheriff Watson handed back the papers. "Seems to me you'll need more than this to prove your claim, especially against the word of a respectable rancher and his wife." "Respectable," Thornton sneered. "She's nothing but a—" Caleb's fist connected with Thornton's jaw before he could finish. The man went down hard, blood spurting from his nose. "That's assault!" Thornton cried from the ground. "Sheriff, arrest him!" Sheriff Watson looked down mildly. "I didn't see any assault. Did you see any assault, Mrs. McKenna?" "No, Sheriff," Evelyn said calmly. "My husband was just helping Mr. Thornton with a nosebleed. Weren't you, dear?" "That's right. Clumsy of him to walk into my fist like that." A crowd had gathered, including Martha Sullivan and her gossiping circle. For once, Caleb was grateful for an audience. "This man," he announced loudly. is attempting to slander my wife with false claims and forged documents. He's a fraud and a coward who preys on vulnerable women. If he's smart, he'll get on the next stage out of town before I decide to help him with another nosebleed." Thornton scrambled to his feet, pointing a shaking finger at Evelyn. "This isn't over. She owes me." "She owes you nothing," Caleb growled. "But if you come near her again, you'll owe me your life. That's a promise." Something in Caleb's eyes must have convinced him. Thornton backed away, muttering threats. But by afternoon he was on the stage, heading east. That night, back at the ranch, Evelyn found Caleb standing by Thomas's grave. She slipped her hand into his. "Are you all right?" He pulled her close. "I was just telling them about you, about how you've brought life back to this place. I think they'd be happy." "Do you regret it? The rush, the scandal?" "The only thing I regret is not marrying you the day you arrived." He kissed her forehead. "You're my wife now, Evelyn McKenna. Nothing and no one will change that." She leaned into him, and together they stood in the peaceful evening, two souls no longer alone. The following weeks brought a shift in how the town treated them. Whether it was the public confrontation with Thornton or simply the fact of their marriage, the whispers died down. Some women even began to nod politely to Evelyn at church. One Sunday, Martha Sullivan approached them after service. "Mrs. McKenna," she said stiffly, "the ladies' auxiliary is making quilts for the orphanage. We could use another pair of hands." Evelyn smiled graciously. "I'd be honored to help." As Martha walked away, Caleb squeezed his wife's hand. "Look at you, becoming respectable." "Don't tease," she said, but her eyes sparkled. "It's a start." That night, as they prepared for bed in what was now their shared room, Evelyn grew quiet. "What's troubling you?" Caleb asked. She sat at the dressing table, unpinning her hair. "I've been thinking about Henry, about what you said, facing things instead of running. There's something I need to tell you." Caleb sat on the bed, waiting. "He's not dead." The words came in a rush. "Henry, I let everyone believe it because it was easier than the truth. Richard sold him." Her voice broke. "He sold our son to a couple who couldn't have children. Said it was better than having him grow up with a mother like me." Caleb felt rage course through him. He sold his own child? He never wanted Henry, said he was another mouth to feed. When I tried to leave the first time, he threatened to get rid of him. I didn't think he'd really. But I came home from work one day, and Henry was gone. Richard had the money on the table, counting it. She was crying now, shoulders shaking. The couple took him somewhere back east. Richard wouldn't say where. That's when I started planning properly, saving every penny, waiting for my chance. Caleb gathered her into his arms, holding her as she sobbed. "We'll find him," he promised. "We'll hire detectives, lawyers, whatever it takes. We'll find your son." She pulled back to look at him. "You'd do that? Take on another man's child? He's your child. That makes him mine now, too." He wiped her tears gently. "We'll bring him home. Evelyn, I swear it. What if he doesn't remember me? It's been over a year." "Then we'll help him remember, or make new memories. Either way, he belongs with his mother." She kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and love into the contact. When they finally made it to bed, their love-making was tender and healing, a reaffirmation of the vows they'd made. As Evelyn slept in his arms, Caleb stared at the ceiling, planning. He'd wire the lawyer in San Antonio tomorrow, start the search for Henry. It might take time and money, but he'd rebuild his family completely. Sarah and Thomas would always hold a piece of his heart, but that heart had proven capable of expanding, of loving again. He pressed a kiss to his wife's hair. "We'll make this right," he whispered. "All of it." Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, but inside the ranch house, two people who'd thought themselves beyond redemption held each other close, no longer alone in their grief or their hope. February brought an unexpected thaw, melting the snow and turning the roads to mud. It also brought news from the lawyer in San Antonio. He'd found a lead on Henry, A couple named George and Margaret Whitman had adopted a boy matching Henry's description 15 months ago in Dallas. They'd since moved to St. Louis. Evelyn clutched the letter with trembling hands. St. Louis. He's in St. Louis. Then we go to St. Louis, Caleb said simply. It's so far. The ranch will survive 2 weeks without us. Jake Henderson owes me a favor. He'll tend the stock. He took her hands. We're going to get your son. They spent the next days preparing for the journey. Evelyn alternated between hope and terror, barely sleeping, checking and rechecking the small daguerreotype of Henry she'd hidden in her trunk. The morning they were to leave. Caleb found her in what had been the spare room, standing by the window. She'd placed Henry's portrait on the dresser beside a small wooden horse Caleb had carved. What if the Whitmans are good people? She asked quietly. What if they love him? What right do I have to tear him away from the only parents he remembers? Caleb wrapped his arms around her from behind. You're his mother. That gives you every right, but we'll handle this careful-like. See what's best for Henry. She leaned back against him. When did you become so wise? About the time I married you. The journey east took 5 days by rail and stage. Evelyn grew quieter with each mile, her hands constantly worrying at the worn photograph. Caleb kept her grounded with small touches, a hand on her back, fingers intertwined with hers. Quiet reassurances in the dark of their sleeping compartments. St. Louis was bigger than anywhere either had been, bustling with carriages and crowds. The lawyer had provided an address in a respectable neighborhood. As their hired cab approached the neat brick house with its painted shutters and tidy garden, Evelyn grabbed Caleb's arm. I can't. What if he screams when he sees me? What if... Then we'll face it together. He lifted her chin. You're the strongest woman I know. Evelyn McKenna. You survived Thornton. You survived losing Henry. You survived starting over. You can do this. They knocked at the door. A pleasant-faced woman in her 40s answered, flour dusting her apron. Yes? Mrs. Whitman. Caleb removed his hat. I'm Caleb McKenna, and this is my wife Evelyn. We'd like to speak with you about the boy you adopted in Dallas. The woman's face went carefully blank. I think you must be mistaken. Good day. Please. Evelyn stepped forward. I know how this must seem, but I'm his mother, his real mother. He was taken from me against my will. Mrs. Whitman studied Evelyn's face, perhaps seeing the desperation there. After a long moment, she stepped aside. You'd better come in. The parlor was warm and welcoming, with needlework on the chairs and children's books scattered on a low table. Mrs. Whitman gestured for them to sit. My husband is at his shop, she said slowly. Perhaps that's for the best. He's protective of William. William? Evelyn's voice cracked. That's what we call him. William George Whitman. She smoothed her skirts nervously. The man who arranged the adoption said the boy's mother was dead, said his father couldn't care for him alone. The man lied, Caleb said flatly. He had no right to that child. We have proof, if you need it. Mrs. Whitman's eyes filled with tears. We tried for so long to have children. When the opportunity came, we didn't ask enough questions. We were just so grateful. A sound from the hallway made them all turn. A small boy peered around the door frame, brown curls escaping from under a cap, green eyes bright with curiosity. Evelyn made a strangled sound. William. Mrs. Whitman said gently. Come meet our guests. The boy approached shyly, staying close to Mrs. Whitman's chair. He was taller than when Evelyn had last seen him, his face losing its baby roundness. But those were definitely her father's eyes looking out of Henry's face. Hello, he said politely. Are you staying for tea? Evelyn couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at her son, drinking in every detail. Caleb took her hand, squeezing gently. Maybe for a bit? He told the boy. What's that you're playing with? Henry, William, held up a wooden soldier. Papa made it. He's teaching me to whittle, but Mama says I'm too young for a real knife yet. Your papa sounds wise. Caleb said, I used to whittle toys for my boy. You have a boy? I did. He's in heaven now. The child's face grew solemn. That's sad. Mama says heaven is nice, though. Throughout this exchange, Evelyn remained frozen, her eyes never leaving her son, Mrs. Whitman watched her with growing understanding and sadness. William, she said softly, why don't you go play in the nursery? I'll call you when tea's ready. After he left, Mrs. Whitman turned to Evelyn. How long since you've seen him? 15 months, Evelyn whispered. He was 4. Does he ever ask about before? Sometimes he has nightmares, calls for someone in his sleep. We thought it was nonsense words, but... She studied Evelyn's face again. He calls for his mama. Not me, I'm mama. He calls for Muvvy. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. That's what he called me. He couldn't say mother properly. They sat in heavy silence. Finally, Mrs. Whitman spoke. He's happy here. We love him as our own. He has a good life. Wants for nothing. I'm sure he does, Caleb said when Evelyn couldn't respond. You seem like good people, but he was stolen from his mother, sold like property. Surely you can understand. I understand that I've raised him for over a year, that he calls me Mama and my husband Papa, that tearing him away would destroy all of us. Mrs. Whitman's voice broke. Please, I'm begging you. Don't take him from the only home he knows. Evelyn finally found her voice. You think I don't know what I'm asking? You think I haven't lain awake every night for 15 months wondering if he was safe, if he was loved, if he remembered me at all? She stood, pacing to the window. I didn't abandon him. He was ripped from my arms while I was at work, trying to earn enough to feed us both. I came home to an empty house and a monster counting the money he'd made from selling my baby. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitman whispered. Truly, but that doesn't change where we are now. No, Evelyn agreed. It doesn't. Caleb stood, moving to his wife's side. What do you want to do? She stared out at the tidy garden where a swing hung from an oak tree. Evidence of a childhood being lived. Being loved. I want my son back, she said quietly. But more than that, I want him happy. I want him whole. She turned to face Mrs. Whitman. You said he has nightmares? Yes, less now than at first, but still sometimes. He watched his father hurt me, Evelyn said bluntly. That's what he dreams about, the yelling, the violence. He was too young to understand, but not too young to be afraid. Mrs. Whitman paled. We didn't know. The man said his mother died in childbirth. So many lies. Evelyn returned to her chair, suddenly exhausted. Tell me about his life here. Please, I need to know. For the next hour, Mrs. Whitman spoke of birthday parties and bedtime stories, of first days of school and scraped knees, of a little boy who loved horses and hated carrots and insisted on saying prayers for his other mama, even though they'd told him she was in heaven. He remembers me? Evelyn's voice was wondering. Some part of him does. We never understood it, but he was very insistent. Said his other mama sang him songs. Lavender's blue, Evelyn murmured. Every night. They were interrupted by Mr. Whitman's arrival home. He was a stocky man with kind eyes that turned wary when he saw the strangers in his parlor. His wife quickly explained the situation. Absolutely not, he said firmly. That boy is our son now. I don't care what papers you have or what sob story you're peddling. You won't take him. George, his wife said softly. It's true. Look at her. Look at his eyes and her face. I don't care if she birthed him herself. She gave him up. I never gave him up. Evelyn's composure finally shattered. He was stolen, sold. Do you understand? I would have died before willingly letting him go. Henry appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Papa, why is everyone shouting? He ran to Mr. Whitman, who scooped him up protectively. But the boy's eyes found Evelyn over his shoulder, studying her with that intense curiosity children possessed. Do I know you? He asked suddenly. You look like someone from my dreams. Evelyn's hands shook. Do I? He nodded solemnly. The pretty lady who sings. But that's silly, isn't it? Dream people aren't real. Sometimes they are, she managed. Sometimes they're just people who love you from far away. Henry considered this. Like my other mama. The room went still. Even Mr. Whitman seemed frozen. Yes, Evelyn whispered. Like her. William, Mrs. Whitman said carefully. Would you like to hear a song? A special song? Henry nodded eagerly. Evelyn looked at the other woman, who nodded encouragement, in a voice that trembled only slightly. Evelyn began to sing. Lavender's blue, dilly dilly, lavender's green. When I'm king, dilly dilly, you shall be queen. Henry's eyes went wide. He struggled down from Mr. Whitman's arms and took a step toward Evelyn, then another. By the time she reached the second verse, he was standing directly in front of her, tears streaming down his small face. Muvvy? The word was barely a whisper. Muvvy, you came back? Oh, my darling boy. Evelyn fell to her knees, gathering him into her arms as he flung himself at her. Yes, my love. Muvvy came back. Muvvy will always come back. They clung to each other, both sobbing. Caleb moved to stand behind them, his hand on Evelyn's shoulder. The Whitmans held each other. Mrs. Whitman crying openly while her husband struggled with his own emotions. When the storm of tears passed, Henry pulled back to study his mother's face. Why did you go away? I didn't want to, sweetheart. Someone took you away from me. But I looked and looked until I found you. Like in the stories? Like the prince looking for Sleeping Beauty. Just like that. Henry turned to look at the Whitmans, confusion clear on his face. But Mama and Papa take care of me now. I know they do, and they love you very much. I love them too. His lower lip trembled. Do I have to choose? The adults exchanged looks over his head. It was Caleb who knelt down beside them. What if you didn't have to choose? He said gently. What if you could have all of us? Mr. Whitman stepped forward. What are you suggesting? Caleb stood, addressing him man to man. You love that boy. I can see it. And he loves you. Tearing him away from here would hurt him, maybe beyond repair. But he needs his mother too, needs to know where he came from, who he is. You're suggesting some sort of arrangement? I'm suggesting we do what's best for Henry. Not what's best for any of us, but what's best for him. Mrs. Whitman wiped her eyes. He could visit? Spend time with both families? It's not ideal, Evelyn said, still holding Henry close. But nothing about this situation is ideal. We make the best of what we have. You'd agree to that? Mr. Whitman's suspicion was giving way to cautious hope. Not try to steal him in the night? I'm not the one who steals children. Evelyn said firmly. I just want my son to know I never stopped loving him, never stopped looking for him. Henry tugged at her sleeve. Are you staying here? In St. Louis? No, sweetheart. I live far away. In Texas, on a ranch with horses. His eyes lit up. Real horses? Can I see them? Would you like to? Maybe come stay with us sometimes. He looked between her and the Whitmans, clearly torn. But then I'd miss Mama and Papa. And when you're here, you'll miss us. Caleb said gently. That's the hard part about loving people. But missing someone just means you have love in more than one place. It took hours to work out the details. Henry would stay primarily with the Whitmans during the school year, but spend summers and some holidays in Texas. Letters would be exchanged regularly. As he got older, he could have more say in the arrangement. It's not perfect, Mr. Whitman said as they shook hands. But it's fair. That night, at the hotel, Evelyn cried herself to sleep in Caleb's arms. It hurts, she whispered. Having to leave him again. I know, but this time, you know where he is, know he's safe and loved, and come June, he'll be on a train heading our way. The Whitmans are good people. He's lucky to have them. He's luckier to have you, a mother who loved him enough to do what was hard instead of what she wanted. She raised her head to look at him. How did I get so fortunate? To find you. I'm the fortunate one. He kissed her gently. Now sleep. Tomorrow we start home. And we've got a room to prepare for a certain young man's summer visit. As Evelyn drifted off, Caleb held her close, thinking about the strange turns life took. He'd thought himself done with fatherhood, done with love. Now he had a wife he adored and a stepson to help raise. Sarah and Thomas would always be part of him, but his heart had room for more. Room for this complicated, messy, beautiful family they were building. The journey home seemed longer, weighted with both joy and sorrow. But when they finally crested the hill overlooking the ranch, Evelyn straightened in her seat. "We need to paint the house," she said suddenly, "and fix up the spare room properly. Maybe build a tree house where the old oak stands. Henry loves climbing." Caleb smiled, listening to her plans. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past, but building a future anyway. They'd all carry scars, but scars just proved you'd survived something worth surviving. As they pulled up to their home, he helped his wife down and pulled her close. "Welcome home, Mrs. McKenna." She smiled up at him. The first real smile since leaving St. Louis. Home. Yes, that's what this is now. Home for all of us. March brought spring to Texas, and with it a frenzy of preparation. Evelyn threw herself into readying the ranch for Henry's summer visit, transforming the spare room with cheerful yellow paint and new furniture Caleb built himself, a bookshelf filled with adventure stories, a desk for drawing, and by the window, a special stand for the wooden horse that would wait for its boy. But their newfound peace was shattered when Jake Sullivan rode out with news that turned Evelyn's face white. "That Thornton fellow's back," Jake said grimly. "And he's not alone. Brought some fancy lawyer from Dallas, saying he's got new evidence about his marriage claim. They're staying at the hotel, stirring up talk." Caleb's jaw tightened. "What kind of evidence?" "Don't know exactly. But Martha, you know how she is. Martha says they've been visiting folks, asking questions about Mrs. McKenna, when she came, how she acts, whether you two were proper before the wedding." Evelyn sank into a chair. "He won't give up. Not Richard. He's like a dog with a bone when he thinks someone's wronged him." "Let him dig," Caleb said harshly. "We're legally married. He's got no claim." But Jake shifted uncomfortably. "There's more. He's been talking to that traveling preacher who comes through, Reverend Dawson, saying maybe your marriage ain't valid if Mrs. McKenna was already married when she took vows with you." "That's ridiculous," Caleb snapped. "Maybe so, but folks are listening. You know how they love scandal." After Jake left, Evelyn stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. "I should leave. Go somewhere he can't find me. You don't deserve—" "Stop." Caleb turned her to face him. "We've had this conversation. You're not running. We face this together. But if he ruins your reputation, turns the town against us, then we'll make our own way. I don't need their approval. I need you." She searched his face. "What if he finds out about Henry? What if he tries to use that against us? Then we protect our son, both from him and from anyone else who tries to hurt this family." The next day, they went to town together, heads high despite the whispers that followed them. At the general store, they found Thornton holding court with several townspeople, his oily voice carrying across the room. "Poor Evelyn always was prone to fantasies," he was saying. "Delicate mind, you understand. After our boy died, she never was quite right, running off, telling wild stories. I've been searching for months, desperate to bring my poor wife home where she can get proper care." "That's a damn lie," Caleb growled, stepping forward. Thornton's eyes glittered with malice. "Mr. McKenna, how good of you to bring my wife to see me. She's not your wife. I have documentation that says otherwise." He produced papers with a flourish. Marriage certificate, signed and witnessed. And now, a new statement from Reverend James Thornton himself, swearing to the validity of the ceremony he performed. "Your cousin," Evelyn said coldly. "How convenient that he's suddenly willing to perjure himself. Such harsh words. My dear, you see?" He addressed his audience. "The delusions persist. She's even convinced this poor man that her fantasies are real. Martha Sullivan and her circle pressed closer, eager for drama. Sheriff Watson stood near the door, watching carefully. "Tell them the truth," Caleb demanded. "Tell them how you sold her son, how you beat her, how you forced her into a sham marriage to pay her father's gambling debts." Thornton's face darkened. "More fantasies. Our son died of fever, a tragedy that broke her mind. As for the rest, what desperate lies won't a fallen woman tell to justify her adultery?" The word hung in the air like a slap. Several women gasped. Evelyn stood straighter, her chin lifting. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice carrying clearly. "Very well. The truth is that Richard Thornton is a predator who preys on the vulnerable. When my father died owing him money, he saw an opportunity. A young woman alone, no family, no protection. He arranged a false marriage ceremony to trap me, then used me as he pleased for 3 years. "Evelyn," Caleb warned, but she shook her head. "No, let them hear it all. Let them judge with full knowledge." She faced the crowd. "He never wanted our son, called him another mouth to feed. When I tried to leave, he sold Henry to strangers for $50. $50 for a child's life. That's the man asking for your sympathy. Lies." Thornton sputtered, but doubt crept into some faces. "Then produce Henry." Sheriff Watson said suddenly, "You say your son died. She says he was sold. Seems simple enough to prove. The boy was buried back east. The grief, you understand. I understand plenty." The sheriff's voice hardened, "including that filing false legal documents is a serious crime." A commotion at the door interrupted them. Reverend Morrison entered, followed by a well-dressed stranger carrying a leather case. "Ah," the Reverend said. "Mr. Thornton, I believe? This is Mr. James Hartley from Austin. He's a territorial judge here on circuit. When I heard about your claims, I thought it best to involve proper legal authority. Judge Hartley was an older man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I understand there's a dispute over a marriage?" Both parties presented their cases, Thornton growing increasingly agitated as the judge asked pointed questions about dates, witnesses, and documentation. When pressed about his cousin's ordination, he began to sweat. "Your Honor," Evelyn said quietly, "might I show you something?" She produced a worn piece of paper from her pocket. "This is a letter from Reverend James Thornton, written to me 2 years ago. In it, he apologizes for his part in the deception and admits he was never ordained. He was just a traveling salesman who needed money." Thornton lunged for the letter, but Sheriff Watson caught his arm. The judge read it carefully, then fixed Thornton with a stern gaze. "This appears to be a clear case of fraud. Mr. Thornton, not only regarding the marriage but in your current attempts to claim Mrs. McKenna as your wife, I suggest you leave town immediately, unless you'd prefer to face charges. This isn't over." Thornton snarled at Evelyn. "You think you've won? I know about the boy. I know where he is. Maybe I'll pay him a visit." Caleb's fist sent him sprawling for the second time. This time, Thornton stayed down, blood streaming from his nose. "That's twice you've walked into my husband's fist," Evelyn observed calmly. "One might think you'd learn." Sheriff Watson hauled Thornton to his feet. "Judge, I think this man just threatened a child. That's worth a cell in my jail, wouldn't you say?" "Indeed. Lock him up. Sheriff, we'll arrange transport to Austin for trial tomorrow." As Thornton was dragged away, still shouting threats, the crowd began to disperse. Some looked ashamed, others disappointed at the anticlimax. But a few women approached Evelyn. "We're sorry," one said quietly, "for listening to gossip, for judging without knowing." Martha Sullivan cleared her throat. "The invitation to the quilting circle stands, Mrs. McKenna, if you're still interested." "Thank you," Evelyn said graciously. "I'd be honored." That night, as they lay in bed, Caleb held his wife close. "You were magnificent today, facing him down like that." "I was terrified," she admitted. "But then I thought of Henry, of the life we're building. I won't let Richard or anyone else destroy that." He can't hurt us now. The judge will see he serves time for fraud. And after, men like Richard don't give up easily. Then we'll be ready. But right now, let's focus on happier things, like getting Henry's room finished. Only 3 more months until he visits. Evelyn smiled, snuggling closer. Tell me again about the treehouse you're planning. As Caleb described his elaborate plans, Evelyn let herself relax. They'd weathered another storm, come out stronger. Whatever came next, they'd face it as they faced everything now, together. The next weeks passed peacefully. Thornton was sentenced to 2 years in prison for fraud and attempted extortion. The town, perhaps feeling guilty for their quick judgment, went out of their way to include Evelyn in social activities. She joined the quilting circle, helped with church bazaars, and slowly became part of the community fabric. One afternoon in late March, as Evelyn hung laundry and Caleb worked on the treehouse, riders approached. Her heart clenched with familiar fear until she recognized Jake Sullivan and Reverend Morrison. "Letter came for you." Jake called out, "From St. Louis. Thought you'd want it right away." Evelyn's hands shook as she took the envelope. Inside was a letter in Henry's careful printing. "Dear Movie and Mr. Caleb, Mama Whitman helped me write this. I am learning my letters good. I can write my whole name now. Henry William Morrison Whitman. That is a lot of names. I told everyone at school about my other family in Texas with horses. Billy Thompson says I am making it up, but I know it is true. Can I really come in summer? Papa Whitman says it is a long train ride, but I am brave. I will bring my soldiers to show you. Love. Henry Peace. Is it true you have a treehouse?" Evelyn laughed through her tears. "He wants to know about the treehouse." Caleb grinned. "Then I better make it special. Can't disappoint the boy." Reverend Morrison smiled. "It's good to see joy in this house again. You two have been through trials that would break lesser souls." "We're still standing," Caleb said, his arm around Evelyn. "That's what matters." As the men left, Evelyn reread the letter, tracing each wobbly letter with her finger. He signed it with all his names, Morrison and Whitman both. Smart boy. Knows he belongs to multiple families who love him. Like we do. Evelyn said softly, "You still carry Sarah and Thomas. I carry Henry even when he's far away. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies." "When did you get so wise?" "About the time I married you." She echoed his words back to him. That night, Evelyn sat at the table composing a reply while Caleb sketched treehouse plans. The lamp cast a warm glow over the scene, an ordinary evening that would have seemed impossible just months ago. "Dear Henry," she read aloud, "the treehouse is real and wonderful. Mr. Caleb is building it just for you, with a rope ladder and a secret compartment for treasures." As she wrote, Caleb watched his wife, marveling at the journey that had brought them here. From grief to hope, from isolation to connection, from existing to truly living again. The road hadn't been easy, might never be easy, but they walked it hand in hand. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There were still those in town who whispered, still moments when grief ambushed them both. But tonight, in their lamplit kitchen, planning for a little boy's visit, they had everything they needed. "How should I sign it?" Evelyn asked. "With love," Caleb said simply. "Always with love." She smiled and bent to write. "All our love, Movie and Papa Caleb." "Papa Caleb?" He raised an eyebrow. "If you're willing, he'll need to call you something." Caleb thought of Thomas, of the joy of hearing Papa in a child's voice. Different child, different circumstances, but perhaps the heart could expand infinitely when given the chance. "Papa Caleb sounds just fine," he said gruffly. Evelyn sealed the letter and came to sit in his lap, her arms around his neck. "I love you, Caleb McKenna." "And I love you, Evelyn McKenna, forever and always." Outside, coyotes called across the prairie, and wind whispered through the new leaves of the oak tree. But inside, two people who'd found their way back from darkness held each other close, writing the next chapter of their story with hope, courage, and most of all, love. June arrived with blazing heat and boundless anticipation. Evelyn had barely slept the night before Henry's arrival, checking and rechecking his room, baking his favorite cookies from memory, smoothing the quilt on his bed for the dozenth time. "You'll wear a hole in that floor," Caleb said gently, catching her mid-pace at dawn. What if he's changed his mind? What if the Whitmans decided not to send him? What if— He pulled her into his arms. "He's coming. Jake got the telegram yesterday confirming he was on the train. In 6 hours, you'll have your boy." The train station was crowded with summer travelers, but Evelyn only had eyes for the approaching engine. As it pulled to a stop with a great hiss of steam, she gripped Caleb's hand so tight he thought his fingers might break. Then she saw him. Henry stepped down carefully, a conductor's hand on his shoulder, wearing short pants and a jacket despite the heat. His eyes scanned the crowd uncertainly until they found her. "Muvvy!" He broke free and ran, flinging himself into her arms with such force she nearly fell. "Oh, my darling boy," she sobbed, holding him tight. "My precious boy." When they finally pulled apart, Henry studied her face seriously. "You're really here, not a dream. Really here," she assured him. "And this is Papa Caleb." Henry turned to Caleb with the fearless trust of childhood. "Did you really build me a treehouse?" Caleb's throat tightened at the name. "I did indeed. Want to see it?" The ride to the ranch was filled with Henry's chatter. Everything was new and exciting. The vast sky, the cacti, a roadrunner that raced alongside their wagon. He sat between them on the bench, occasionally touching Evelyn's arm as if to assure himself she was real. "The Whitmans sent this," he said, producing an envelope from his jacket. "Mama Whitman cried at the station, but she said they were happy tears because I get to have an adventure." The letter thanked them for their patience and included careful instructions about Henry's routines, his fear of thunderstorms, his love of stories before bed. At the bottom, Mrs. Whitman had added, "We're trusting you with our heart. Please send word that he arrived safely." "They love you very much," Evelyn said, smoothing his curls. "I know. That's why I have lots of names now. Henry William Morrison Whitman McKenna." He grinned. "Billy Thompson can't say I'm making things up anymore." At the ranch, Henry's eyes went wide. The treehouse was everything Caleb had promised. Sturdy walls, real windows, the rope ladder he'd requested. Inside was a telescope for star watching and the secret compartment he'd written about. "It's perfect," Henry crowed, scrambling up the ladder with Caleb close behind to ensure his safety. Evelyn watched from below, tears streaming down her face. Caleb caught her eye and winked, his own emotions barely contained as Henry exclaimed over each detail. That first week was magical. Henry threw himself into ranch life with enthusiasm, following Caleb around asking endless questions, helping Evelyn in the kitchen, collecting treasures that filled his pockets, interesting rocks, feathers, a snakeskin that made Evelyn shudder. At night, he insisted on stories from both of them. Evelyn sang the old lullabies, while Caleb told tales of cowboys and adventures. Sometimes Henry would grow quiet, processing the strangeness of having two families. "Do you think my other papa misses me?" he asked one evening. "I'm certain he does," Caleb said carefully. "Just like we'll miss you when summer ends." "But I'll come back. Every summer," Evelyn promised. "And Christmas if the Whitmans agree." "Good." Henry snuggled between them on the porch swing. "I like having lots of people who love me." The second week brought challenges. A fierce thunderstorm sent Henry scrambling into their bed at midnight, trembling with terror. As lightning illuminated the room, Evelyn held him close while Caleb told stories to distract him. Thomas was afraid of storms too. Caleb found himself saying, but his mama told him the thunder was just the angels bowling in heaven. "Who's Thomas?" Henry asked, his fear momentarily forgotten. Caleb and Evelyn exchanged glances over his head. They'd agreed to be honest but gentle about their pasts. "He was my little boy," Caleb said softly. "He's in heaven now." Henry digested this solemnly. "Is he an angel? Maybe he's the one bowling." "Maybe he is," Caleb agreed. his voice thick. "I bet he's friends with my guardian angel," Henry decided. "Mama Whitman says everyone has one." The storm passed, but Henry stayed nestled between them until dawn. It felt right, Caleb thought, this small, warm body where emptiness had lived for so long. As June progressed, they fell into easy rhythms. Henry helped gather eggs, learned to brush the horses, and proved surprisingly adept at fishing in the creek. His formal city manners relaxed into boyish exuberance, though he still said please and thank you with careful precision. One afternoon, while Caleb was in town for supplies, Evelyn heard Henry talking in the treehouse. She climbed the ladder to find him arranging his toy soldiers in formation. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" He looked up guilelessly. "Thomas. I'm teaching him to play soldiers. He doesn't know because they didn't have toy soldiers in the olden days when he was little." Evelyn's breath caught. "That's very kind of you." Papa Caleb seemed sad when he talked about him. "I thought maybe Thomas is lonely in heaven, like I was lonely when you went away." He arranged another soldier carefully. "But now neither of us is lonely anymore." She gathered him close. This miraculous child who spoke to the dead with such innocent faith. "You have the kindest heart, Henry." "Muvvy, can I ask something?" "Always." "Why did my first papa send me away? Was I bad?" Evelyn chose her words carefully. "No, sweetheart, you were never bad. Your first papa was sick in his heart and mind. He made terrible choices that had nothing to do with you. Papa Whitman says some people have darkness inside them. That's true, but you don't have any darkness. Henry, you're full of light." He considered this. "Maybe that's why I have so many families, to share the light around." That evening, Evelyn related the conversation to Caleb. He stood silent for a long moment, looking toward the treehouse where Henry's imagination had given his lost son a playmate. "Sarah would have loved him," he said finally. "She always wanted Thomas to have a brother. Maybe they do, in their own way." Evelyn slipped her hand into his. "Children see the world differently. Who are we to say what's real?" Sheriff Watson's arrival the next day shattered their peace. He dismounted with obvious reluctance, hat in hand. "I'm sorry to bring trouble, but thought you should know. Thornton's escaped." Evelyn went rigid. "How?" "Prison wagon overturned during transfer. 2 guards dead. Thornton and another prisoner gone. Could be headed anywhere, but—" He looked uncomfortable. "Man like that holds grudges." "He knows about Henry," Evelyn whispered. "He threatened." "We'll protect him," Caleb said firmly. "Sheriff, what do you need from us?" "Keep the boy close. I'll have men watching the roads. Might be nothing. He could be halfway to Mexico by now. But better safe." After Watson left, they debated telling Henry. Caleb argued for honesty. Evelyn feared destroying his happiness. In the end, they compromised on partial truth. "We need to stay close to the house for a while," Evelyn told him. "And you must promise never to wander off alone." "Is something wrong?" His green eyes were too perceptive. "Just being careful," Caleb said, "like how we're careful around the bull or during storms." Henry accepted this with the adaptability of childhood, content to play nearer the house, but Evelyn barely slept. Starting at every sound, Caleb took to wearing his gun even for simple chores. 3 days passed in tense vigilance. On the 4th morning, Evelyn was hanging laundry when she heard voices from the treehouse. Her blood froze. Henry had been in the kitchen moments ago. She crept closer, then sagged with relief. Henry was alone, conducting both sides of an animated conversation between his soldiers. As she turned back to the house, strong hands seized her from behind. "Hello, Evelyn." Thornton's voice slithered against her ear. "Miss me?" She opened her mouth to scream, but his hand clamped over it. He was thinner, dirtier, but his grip remained cruel. Now. Let's not alarm the boy. He's going to earn me a pretty penny, just like before. Course, might have to eliminate the complications first. That husband of yours, for instance." Terror gave her strength. She bit down hard on his palm and wrenched free. Screaming, "Caleb!" Thornton backhanded her, sending her sprawling, but her cry had done its work. Caleb burst from the barn, rifle in hand. From the treehouse came Henry's frightened voice. "Muvvy! Stay there! Henry!" she shouted. "Stay in the treehouse!" Thornton grabbed for her again, but Caleb's rifle shot sent him diving behind the water trough. "Let her go, Thornton!" "You know. Or what? You'll shoot me in front of the boy?" Thornton laughed nastily. "I think not. You're too soft. McKenna always were." Another figure emerged from behind the barn, the escaped prisoner, pointing a rusty pistol at Caleb. The situation spiraled toward disaster until a small voice piped up. "Hey, mister, catch!" Everyone looked up to see Henry at the treehouse window, hurling something down. His collection of rocks, thrown with surprising accuracy, pelted both criminals. In the confusion, Evelyn rolled clear and Caleb got a clean shot, winging the second man's gun arm. The pistol went flying. Thornton lunged for it, but Evelyn was closer. Her hands closed on the weapon just as he reached her. "Don't," she said quietly, the gun steady despite her shaking. "I'm not the frightened girl you terrorized anymore. You won't shoot." But uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "You don't have it in you." "Maybe not, but I'll do anything to protect my son." Sheriff Watson and his deputies thundered into the yard. Having heard the shots, in moments, both criminals were in custody. Thornton spat curses as they dragged him away, but Evelyn had already dismissed him, running to the treehouse where Henry waited. "I was brave, wasn't I?" he asked, launching himself into her arms. "Like David with Goliath." "The bravest," she agreed, holding him tight. "I knew Papa Caleb would protect us. And you too, Muvvy. You were fierce like the mama bear in my book." That night, after statements were given and assurances made that Thornton would never threaten them again, they sat together on the porch. Henry had finally succumbed to exhaustion, sleeping between them on the swing. "He saved us," Caleb said wonderingly. "This little boy with his rocks and his courage. He's a McKenna," Evelyn said simply. "Of course he's brave." Caleb looked down at the tousled brown head resting against his chest. "Yes," he agreed softly. "He is." The remaining weeks of summer passed too quickly. Henry's fear from the incident faded with the resilience of childhood, becoming another adventure to share with the Whitmans. He helped Caleb repair the fence Thornton had damaged, planted late vegetables with Evelyn, and filled the house with his particular brand of sunshine. The night before his departure, they found him crying in the treehouse. "I don't want to go," he sobbed. "I want to stay here forever." "Oh, sweetheart." Evelyn held him as Caleb rubbed his back. "We want that too, but the Whitmans love you. They've been counting the days until you come home. This is home too." "Yes," Caleb agreed. "You have two homes. That makes you special." "Not everyone gets that, but I'll miss you so much. And we'll miss you. But Christmas will come before you know it, and we'll write letters every week." Henry's sobs slowed to sniffles. "Promise?" "Promise," they said together. At the station the next morning, Henry clung to them until the last possible moment. "I love you, Muvvy, I love you. Papa Caleb, we love you too." Evelyn managed through her tears. "So very much." As the train pulled away, Henry waved from the window until he was just a speck in the distance. Evelyn turned into Caleb's chest and wept. "It's not fair," she choked out, having to say goodbye over and over. "No," he agreed, his own eyes wet. "But having him at all is worth the pain of goodbyes." They returned to a house that felt too quiet, too empty, despite being fuller than it had been in years. But on Henry's pillow lay a note in his careful printing. "I hid treasures in the secret compartment for you. Don't be sad. Love, Henry, Thomas says he'll keep you company until Christmas." Evelyn laughed through fresh tears. "How does a 6-year-old get so wise?" "By being loved by many people," Caleb said, "and by loving them all back." That night, as they prepared for bed in their too-quiet house, Evelyn paused. "I want to try again," she said suddenly. "For another child, our child, if you're willing." Caleb pulled her close. "Nothing would make me happier." As they held each other in the darkness, both thinking of the son who lived in two places at once. New hope stirred. Their family was unconventional, scattered across miles, bound by choice rather than just blood. But it was theirs, built on love and sacrifice and the courage to keep believing in happiness despite all evidence to the contrary. And that, they knew, was more than enough. Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow, rare for their part of Texas. Evelyn stood at the window, one hand resting on her slightly rounded belly, watching the road for any sign of the promised wagon. "They'll be here," Caleb said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Stage was only running a few hours late. As if summoned by his words, a hired wagon appeared over the hill. Before it even stopped, Henry tumbled out, calling, "Movie! Papa Caleb, I'm here!" He ran full tilt into their arms, all three laughing and crying at once. Behind him, the Whitmans climbed down more sedately. "We hope you don't mind." "Mrs." Whitman said hesitantly. "Henry insisted we see where he spends summers. We took rooms in town. Of course." "Nonsense," Evelyn interrupted. "You'll stay here. We have plenty of room." The reunion was joyful chaos. Henry dragged everyone to see how his treehouse had been reinforced for winter, showed off the Christmas tree he'd helped decorate through letters, and chattered nonstop about school and friends and adventures. But it was at dinner that he noticed Evelyn's changed figure. "Movie, why are you rounder?" The adults exchanged glances. They'd planned to tell him, but not quite so publicly. "Well," Evelyn said carefully, "Papa Caleb and I have news. You're going to be a big brother." Henry's eyes went wide. "A real brother, not just Thomas in heaven. A real brother or sister, yes. When?" "Spring, maybe April." Henry whooped with delight, then grew suddenly serious. "Will you still love me, even with a new baby?" "Oh, sweetheart." Evelyn pulled him close. "We'll love you forever and always. Love multiplies. Remember, it doesn't divide." "Mrs." Whitman wiped her eyes. "Congratulations. Henry will be a wonderful big brother." That evening, after Henry was tucked into bed, the four adults sat by the fire. The awkwardness of the situation, two sets of parents, one child, hung in the air until Mr. Whitman cleared his throat. "We owe you an apology," he said. "When you first came to St. Louis, we saw you as a threat. We didn't understand. You were protecting Henry." Caleb said, "We'd have done the same. Still, we could have been kinder. And now, seeing how happy he is here, how loved." "Mrs." Whitman's voice broke. "Thank you for sharing him with us. Thank you for loving him when I couldn't be there." Evelyn replied softly. "For giving him stability and care when his world fell apart. He talks about you constantly." "Mr." Whitman admitted. "Every adventure here becomes a story for school. His teacher says he writes essays about having two families like other children write about summer vacations." "Is that difficult for you?" Caleb asked carefully. "At first," Mrs. Whitman said. "But then we realized he's not choosing between us. He's including all of us in his world. We're not competing for his love. We're expanding it." Evelyn finished. "All of us together. Giving him more than any of us could alone." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. Henry woke everyone before dawn, bouncing with excitement. The tree held presents from both sets of parents, plus packages that had arrived from St. Louis friends. "This is the best Christmas ever," Henry declared. "Surrounded by toys and books and new clothes. Even better than last year." "Why's that?" Caleb asked, though he suspected he knew. "Because everyone I love is here. Well, except Thomas. But he's here in the secret way." Henry patted his heart matter-of-factly. Later, as dinner preparations filled the house with wonderful smells, Evelyn found herself in the kitchen with Mrs. Whitman. They worked in companionable silence until the older woman spoke. "I lost a baby once, before we got Henry. The doctor said I couldn't have children after that." She kneaded bread dough with practiced motions. "I was so angry at God. Why give me a mother's heart with no child to love?" "I'm sorry," Evelyn said softly. "Don't be, because then Henry came, and I understood. Sometimes God's plans are bigger than our understanding. You needed someone to love your boy when you couldn't. We needed a child to love. It all worked out. And now he has double the love. Triple, Mrs. Whitman corrected with a smile. Don't forget Mr. McKenna. Henry adores him. Caleb's wonderful with him. He'll be a good father to the new baby, too. He already is. The way Henry talks about Papa Caleb teaching him man things, riding and roping and building. Things George teaches him, too, but different. Henry says he's learning to be both a gentleman and a cowboy. They laughed together. Two mothers united by love for the same child. The week passed in a blur of activities. Henry helped with simple ranch chores, proudly showing the Whitmans how capable he'd become. Snowball fights erupted spontaneously. Stories were shared by the fire each night. One evening, Evelyn came upon Henry and Caleb in the barn. Henry was brushing Rosie while Caleb instructed him gently. That's it, nice and smooth. She likes when you talk to her. Rosie, you're the prettiest horse in Texas. Henry crooned. Maybe in the whole world. Henry, Caleb said carefully, I want you to know something. The baby coming, it doesn't change how I feel about you. You were my son first, in my heart. You brought life back to this place. Henry put down the brush and hugged Caleb tight around the waist. I know. Papa Caleb, you chose me, even though you didn't have to. That's special. We chose each other. Caleb corrected, his voice thick. All of us. On New Year's Eve, they made a tradition of writing wishes for the coming year and burning them in the fireplace. Henry's list was long and earnest. I wish for the baby to be healthy. I wish to be a good big brother. I wish summer would come fast. I wish nobody would be sad anymore. That's a lot of wishes. Mr. Whitman said fondly. I have a lot of hope. Henry replied seriously. The adults exchanged glances over his head, marveling at the wisdom wrapped in such a small package. When time came for the Whitmans to leave, the parting was bittersweet but not devastating. The successful visit had proven what they all hoped, that love could stretch across miles, that Henry could belong fully to both families without being torn apart. We'll see you this summer, Evelyn promised, hugging him tight. And you'll meet your new brother or sister. I'll teach them everything. Henry promised, like Thomas taught me in the treehouse. As the wagon rolled away, Caleb and Evelyn stood together, hands clasped. No tears? He asked. Happy ones, she admitted. We did it. We made this strange, beautiful thing work. The winter months passed quietly. Letters flew back and forth. Henry's growing more sophisticated as his writing improved. He sent drawings of his imagined sibling, advice for baby care gleaned from library books, and constant assurances that he was being good for the Whitmans. Evelyn's belly grew rounder. The ladies from the quilting circle, now counting her as one of their own, showered her with baby clothes and advice. Even Martha Sullivan knitted tiny booties, presenting them with gruff affection. Misjudged you, she said simply. Takes a strong woman to share her child for his own good, stronger than most of us. April brought wildflowers and anxiety in equal measure. Caleb hovered, driving Evelyn half mad with his protectiveness. I'm not made of glass, she protested as he tried to carry the egg basket for her. You're carrying precious cargo, he countered. My job to protect both of you. When labor began on a mild April morning, Caleb fetched the midwife with record speed. The birth, though long, was uncomplicated. As the sun set, their daughter entered the world with lusty cries. A girl, the midwife announced, healthy and perfect. Caleb held his daughter with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face. She's beautiful, like her mother. What shall we call her? Evelyn asked, exhausted but radiant. They'd discussed names for months, but looking at her now, Caleb knew. Sarah Hope McKenna, for the past and the future. Perfect, Evelyn agreed. They sent telegrams immediately, one to St. Louis, one to the Whitmans planning to bring Henry for a shorter spring visit. His reply came quickly. Sister, I have a sister. Tell baby Sarah I love her already. 2 weeks later, Henry burst through the door like a small tornado. He approached the cradle reverently, eyes wide. "She's so tiny," he whispered. "Was I that tiny?" "Even tinier," Evelyn assured him. Henry reached out carefully to touch Sarah's hand. Her tiny fingers curled around his. "Hi, Sarah. I'm your big brother. I'll protect you forever." That summer established new patterns. Henry proved a devoted brother, helping with diapers, singing lullabies he'd learned from both mothers, entertaining Sarah with silly faces that made her gurgle with joy. "I was wrong," he announced one day. "This is better than just summer." "What is?" Evelyn asked. "Having a sister here. Now you won't be lonely when I'm in St. Louis. You have Sarah, and she has you, and everyone has somebody all the time." Caleb ruffled his hair. "Pretty smart for 7. 7.5, Henry corrected. "That's practically grown up." The years flowed like the creek behind the house, sometimes rushing, sometimes gentle, always moving forward. Henry grew tall and lanky, his visits stretching longer as he got older. Sarah grew into a fearless toddler who followed her big brother everywhere during his stays. The Whitmans became extended family in truth, spending holidays at the ranch, sharing milestones and memories. 2 families became one large, loving network with Henry as the bridge between them. One summer evening when Henry was 12 and Sarah 5, Evelyn found them in the treehouse. Henry was teaching Sarah to use the telescope, pointing out constellations. "See that bright one? That's Thomas's star. He picked it out special to watch over us." "How do you know?" Sarah asked. "Because he told me. Silly. Don't you listen when he talks?" Sarah considered this. "Sometimes I think I hear him laughing when we play." "That's him," Henry confirmed. "He likes watching us be happy." Evelyn climbed down quietly, not wanting to disturb their magic. At the bottom, Caleb waited. "Still talking to Thomas?" he asked softly. "Still including him," she corrected, making sure Sarah knows her other brother, the one who made room for all of us. They walked back to the house hand in hand, pausing to look back at the treehouse where their children's voices carried on the evening air. The ranch that had once held only grief now overflowed with life and laughter and love. "Thank you," Caleb said suddenly. "For what?" "For being brave enough to stay, for believing we could build this, for giving me back my life." "We gave each other back our lives," she corrected. "That's what love does. It resurrects us." As stars began to appear in the vast Texas sky, they heard Henry pointing out more constellations to Sarah, weaving stories of cowboys and angels and families bound by choice rather than chance. Inside, baby clothes waited to be folded. Mrs. Whitman was expecting through adoption again, and everyone was knitting. The night wrapped around them like a blessing, holding safe this unexpected family who'd learned that love wasn't limited by loss or distance or conventional understanding. Love simply was, endless, expanding, eternal as the stars their children counted in the treehouse Caleb built and Henry claimed and Sarah would inherit. And in that love, they were all finally, fully home. Thank you for listening to our Wild West love story. I hope Caleb and Evelyn's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Where are you listening from today? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect with listeners from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more emotional frontier tales. And let me know your thoughts about this story. Did you cry? Which part moved you most? Your feedback helps me craft stories that resonate with your hearts. Until next time, partners.